Bracketville, Texas, June 1968. The sun is brutal, 105 degrees in the shade, and there is no shade. Raquel Welch is sitting in a canvas chair between takes, trying to get sand out of her eyes. She's 27 years old, the most photographed woman in America, and she's miserable. A man in a suit, not a crew member, not an actor, walks up to her. He's been watching her all morning. Now he leans in close, too close. "You know, Miss Welch, there's a party tonight at my hotel. Private, just a few of us. I think you'd find it beneficial to your career." Raquel doesn't respond. She's heard this before. Every actress has. The man puts his hand on her shoulder. "I'm not asking." That's when Dean Martin's voice cuts through the desert air. Not loud, not angry, just matter of fact. "Hey, pal, you lost?" The man turned around. Dean Martin was standing there, drink in hand, cowboy hat tilted back, looking like he had all the time in the world. "This is a closed set," Dean said, "and I don't remember seeing your name on the call sheet. To understand why what happened next mattered, you need to understand Hollywood in 1968. This was before Me Too, before anyone talked about hostile work environments, before actresses had any real power at all. In 1968, women in Hollywood operated under a simple, unspoken rule: keep your mouth shut and take it. The men who ran the studios, who financed the pictures, who decided which actresses worked and which ones disappeared, they did whatever they wanted, and everyone looked the other way. Raquel Welch knew this better than most. She'd exploded onto the scene just 2 years earlier with 1,000,000 Years BC, the fur bikini, the poster that launched 1,000 fantasies. Overnight, she became the most famous sex symbol in the world. But here's the thing about being a sex symbol in 1960s Hollywood. Everyone assumed you came with the territory. Producers would corner her at parties. Studio executives would make suggestions about private meetings. Directors would find reasons to visit her dressing room unannounced. And Raquel was supposed to smile, to be flattered, to play along. As she later wrote in her memoir, "Because of my image, there was constant pressure on me." She was 27 years old, trying to be taken seriously as an actress. And everywhere she turned, there was another man who saw her as something to be acquired. Now, about the man in the suit. His name doesn't matter. What matters is what he represented. He was a financial backer, one of the money men who helped fund the picture. Not a creative, not an artist, just a guy with a checkbook and an appetite. In 1968, men like him were untouchable. They could make or break a production with a phone call. They could end a career with a whisper. Studio heads protected them because they needed their money. Directors tolerated them because they had no choice. When a man like that put his hand on an actress's shoulder and said, "I'm not asking," the actress had two options: go along with it, or watch her career evaporate. That was the system. That was how it worked. And then there was Dean Martin. Dean Martin wasn't a crusader. He wasn't a feminist. He was a 51-year-old crooner who'd seen everything Hollywood had to offer and wasn't impressed by any of it. He'd grown up poor in Steubenville, Ohio, worked in steel mills, dealt cards in illegal gambling joints, boxed under the name Kid Crochet. By 1968, he was one of the biggest stars in the world. The Rat Pack, the TV show, the movies, the records. He had nothing to prove and nothing to fear. But here's what most people didn't understand about Dean Martin. Beneath the lazy charm and the permanent cocktail, there was a code, an old-fashioned Italian-American code about how men were supposed to behave. You didn't cheat at cards, you didn't hit below the belt, and you didn't let some guy in a suit put his hands on a woman who didn't want to be touched. Not on Dean Martin's set. The money man turned around slowly. He was maybe 50. Silver hair, expensive suit. The kind of suit you don't wear to a film set in the middle of the Texas desert unless you want everyone to know you're important. "Do you know who I am?" he asked Dean. Dean took a sip of his drink. "Nope. Don't care." Dean cut him off. "What I know is you're standing too close to my co-star, and she doesn't look comfortable. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take 3 steps back. Then you're going to walk to your car. Then you're going to drive back to wherever you came from." The man's face reddened. "Now listen here, Martin. I have a significant investment in this picture. I have every right to... You have the right to watch the movie when it comes out. In a theater, like everybody else. Dean smiled, that famous lazy smile that never quite reached his eyes. That's all the access you paid for. Raquel watched this exchange in disbelief. She'd never seen anyone talk to a money man like this. Not a director, not a producer, certainly not an actor. The man looked around, expecting someone to intervene. The crew had stopped working. Everyone was watching. "This is outrageous," he sputtered. "I'll have you removed from this production." "Go ahead and try." Dean took another sip. "But I should tell you, I've got a real good contract. The kind where if I walk, the picture doesn't get made. You want to explain to the studio why your little visit just cost them $5 million? The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. "This isn't over," the man finally said. "Yeah, it is." The man left. His car kicked up a cloud of dust as it disappeared down the dirt road toward Bracketville. Dean turned to Raquel. "You okay?" She nodded, still processing what had just happened. "Good." He started to walk away, then stopped. "Hey, if anyone else gives you trouble, you let me know. Jimmy and I got your back." He meant James Stewart, their co-star, another old-school gentleman from a different era. Raquel found her voice. "Why did you do that? He could cause problems for you." Dean shrugged. "What's he gonna do? Tell the studio I was rude to him? I'm rude to everybody. I'm serious. He's connected. So am I." Dean winked. "The difference is my connections actually like me." Word traveled fast on a film set. By lunchtime, everyone knew what had happened. The grips, the lighting guys, the makeup artists, they'd all heard some version of the story. What surprised Raquel was the reaction. The crew started treating her differently. Not worse, better. They'd bring her water without being asked. They'd make sure she had shade between takes. Small things, but noticeable. And the atmosphere on set shifted. There was a feeling now that this production was different, that the people in charge actually gave a damn. 3 days later, Raquel was having lunch with Dean and James Stewart at the small catering tent they'd set up near the location. "Dean told me what happened," Stewart said, in that slow, distinctive drawl. "I want you to know, that kind of behavior isn't acceptable. Not to me, not to anyone on this picture." Raquel smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Jimmy." "Jimmy." Stewart glanced at Dean. "You know, when I started in this business, there were certain standards. A man treated a lady with respect. Didn't matter if she was the star or the girl serving coffee. You treated her right. Those standards still exist," Dean said. "Some people just forgot them." "Well," Stewart said, "perhaps we need to remind them." The next few weeks of filming were unlike anything Raquel had experienced in Hollywood. Dean made a point of having lunch with her every day. Just casual conversation. Nothing romantic, nothing inappropriate. But the message was clear. She wasn't alone. When they had night shoots, Dean would walk her to her car afterward. When a scene required physical contact, he'd check with her first. "You comfortable with this? We can adjust if you need to." It was such a small thing, such an obvious thing. But in 1968 Hollywood, it was revolutionary. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in the desert, Raquel found herself sitting next to Dean outside the production office. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Shoot. Why are you like this?" Dean raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Decent. Most of the men in this industry, they're not." Dean was quiet for a moment. He lit a cigarette, took a long drag. "I got 3 daughters," he finally said. "Claudia, Gail, and Diana. They're everything to me, and I think about them every time I see some creep putting his hands where they don't belong." He looked at Raquel. "I think about what I'd want someone to do if my girls were in that situation. And then I do that. It's that simple. It's that simple." The production moved to Utah for the final sequences. Different landscape, same brutal conditions. One afternoon, a particularly nasty sandstorm rolled in. The crew scrambled to protect the equipment. Dean and Stewart managed to shield their eyes with bandanas. Raquel wasn't so lucky. She had nothing to prevent the sand from lashing into her hair, her eyes, her nose. She was miserable, covered in grit, barely able to see. When the storm passed, Dean appeared beside her with a wet towel and a bottle of water. "Here, get that crap out of your eyes." She took the towel gratefully. "This is the worst location I've ever been on." Beats Vietnam. Raquel laughed despite herself. I suppose it does. Listen, Dean said, we got about 3 more days of this. Then you never have to see another grain of sand as long as you live. You can do 3 days. What if I can't? Then I'll carry you. He smiled. Actually, scratch that. Jimmy would carry you. My back's not what it used to be. On the last day of filming, something happened that Raquel would remember for the rest of her life. They were shooting the final scene, a complex sequence involving horses, gunfire, and a lot of coordination. Tensions were high. Everyone was exhausted and ready to go home. Between takes, Raquel noticed a young woman, maybe 22, 23 years old, standing near the director's chair. A production assistant new to the crew, a man Raquel recognized, another financial backer, different from the first one, was talking to the girl, standing too close. The girl looked uncomfortable, but was trying to smile, trying to be professional. Raquel saw Dean notice it too. Without a word, he walked over. Hey, sweetheart, he said to the production assistant. I need you to take this to my trailer. He handed her his script, completely unnecessary, but it gave her an excuse to leave. Of course, Mr. Martin. She practically ran. Dean turned to the man. You know what I love about making movies? There's always another one. New cast, new crew, new locations. The man looked confused. Yes? And you know what I don't love? Seeing the same faces causing the same problems on every picture I make. Dean patted him on the shoulder hard. Think about that. He walked away. Filming wrapped 3 days later. At the wrap party, a modest affair at a restaurant in Bracketville, Raquel found herself alone with Dean for a moment. I never properly thanked you, she said, for what you did, not just the first day, but all of it. Dean waved it off. Nothing to thank me for. There is, though. Most people in this business, they see something wrong. They look the other way. They protect their careers, their relationships, their investments. She paused. You didn't do that. Dean was quiet for a moment. Then he said something Raquel would never forget. You know what my father used to tell me? He'd say, Dino, a man's character isn't what he does when people are watching. It's what he does when nobody's watching. He took a sip of his drink. Well, on a film set, everybody's watching, so you might as well do the right thing. It's that simple? It's that simple. James Stewart joined them. He'd overheard the conversation. I'll tell you something about Dean, Stewart said. We've known each other, 15 years? Something like that. And in all that time, I've never seen him mistreat anyone. Not a co-star, not a crew member, not a waiter at a restaurant. Stewart smiled. That's rarer than you might think in this business. Dean shrugged. I just don't like bullies. Never have. Probably because I used to be a pretty good boxer. You were a boxer? Raquel asked. Kid Crochet. Dean grinned. Undefeated. That's not true, Stewart said. You lost 12 fights. I won the ones that mattered. Years later, in 2010, Raquel Welch published her memoir, Beyond the Cleavage. In it, she wrote about the constant pressure she faced in Hollywood, the men who saw her as an object, the system that protected predators and punished the women who spoke up. But she also wrote about the men who were different. Dean Martin was the epitome of cool, she said. But what she remembered most wasn't his coolness. It was his kindness. The way he made her feel safe on a set where she should have felt vulnerable. The way he treated her like a colleague, not a conquest. The way he stood between her and the men who saw her as something to be taken. Shirley MacLaine, who worked with Dean throughout the Rat Pack era, said something similar in a 2019 interview. When asked about the men in Hollywood who'd mistreated women over the decades, she was asked about Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. They never hit on me, she said. They protected me. 2 words. They protected me. In an industry where women were routinely exploited, harassed, and silenced, Dean Martin was something different. Not because he gave speeches about equality, not because he led campaigns for women's rights. He just treated women like human beings. Every day, on every set, in every situation. Dean Martin died on Christmas Day, 1995. He was 78 years old. Raquel Welch died on February 15, 2023. She was 82. Neither of them made a big deal about what happened on the set of Bandolero in 1968. It wasn't a story they told in interviews. It wasn't something they bragged about, but the people who were there remembered. The crew members who watched Dean Martin face down a powerful man to protect a young actress. The production assistant who escaped an uncomfortable situation because a movie star handed her a script she didn't need. The other actors who saw that on this set at least. Things would be done differently. The story of Dean Martin and Raquel Welch isn't about a single dramatic confrontation. It's about something quieter, something rarer. It's about a man who used his power to protect people who had less of it. It's about treating women with dignity in an industry that saw them as disposable. It's about doing the right thing, not because anyone was watching, but because it was the right thing to do. That's the Dean Martin story that should be told. Not just the cool guy with the martini glass. Not just the Rat Pack singer with the effortless charm. The man who walked a young actress to her car after night shoots. The man who handed a nervous PA an unnecessary script to get her away from a predator. The man who told powerful men to back off and made it stick. Because that's not just decency. That's character.